Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Platov and renowned Zen master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
Well, today we have some words from Chuang Tzu. The purpose of a fish trap is to catch fish. And when the fish are caught, the trap is forgotten. The purpose of words is to convey ideas. When the ideas are grasped, the words are forgotten. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words? He's the one I would like to talk to. Well, words are very difficult to forget. You know, there is this one time when my sister and I were taking a trip, and the tour guide, he was going on about, you get interested in something and it sticks in the mind. And that's a very good way of saying it. It sticks in the mind. You can't hardly think of anything else for this, Sticks. It just sticks there. Yeah, words stick. They cling. And it's very difficult to throw away the net, the net of words, this net, because not only are the fish caught in it, but the fisher is also caught. How are you going to throw it away? And this symbol becomes heavy, because on the surface we're quite hypnotized with these words, and what is at the center is forgotten. And so people carry this net all their lives, without realizing it's a trap. Yeah. And in the old Egyptian lore, the story is of the great god Thoth, and he saw humanity was working so hard and so devotedly for the gods. He wanted to give them something, as sort of a thank you for what all they were doing. And he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought. And finally he went to the great god Ra, saying, I know what I can give these people. I will give them words. And this great god Ra said, you're putting them in bondage. Yeah. And the Buddha also told a story that is similar. Well, the intent is similar. That there were a few men, say 5, a little group of men, and they were crossing a river. And the river was flooding, and it was stormy, and there were waves in it, and it was rough crossing. And this boat that they were in, they felt saved their lives, because if they were not in the boat, they surely would have drowned. So the boat saved their lives. And finally, they crossed the river, and they reached the other shore. And they were about to go on their way when one of the men said, but we can't leave the boat. It saved our lives. It is our savior. We can't just leave the boat. We would be ungrateful to it if we did. So they picked up the boat and they carried it on their heads. Here are all these men now walking with these 5 men walking with these boats, this boat on their heads. And they went on their journey. And every once in a while they meet somebody who'd look at them a little bit crazy. But one day they met a whole group of people. And of course, they're being a group, why they had more courage. So they asked, well, why carry a boat on your heads? We've never seen such a thing. And to which these men replied, we will have to carry this boat for the rest of our lives, because this boat saved us, and we cannot be ungrateful. Yeah, that's how we are. So now I could also ask, how many boats do you have in your head? I could say how many ladders and reaching up, and how many paths that you're exploring. What about the content of your mind? It's all this furniture that we've got in the mind, huh? All these vehicles, the boats and the ladders and so on. And they arrived because they were to give you a message. And you have received a message, and you're supposed to forget the vehicle. So Chuang Tzu says, where can I find a man who has forgotten words? He is the one I would like to talk to. This silent man I would like to talk to. Now, we all know that silence has no words in it. No. When one is in this silence, then the messages come from the depths, but no words. How is this possible? But this very silence that we are in, is very pregnant with meaning. Yeah. We talk a lot. Yeah, we do. We talk a lot. We use all these words, and you know what we're doing? We throw them out there. You talk to somebody, huh? You're throwing all these words out at them. You're throwing out all your rubbish, because you can run around and gather them all up again. But, you're throwing them out. And, because a lot of people, they feel very good after they've had a chit-chat with somebody. Yeah. It's because they've been relieved. Able to throw out some of this stuff, huh? And the stuff that they're throwing out is not coming from the silence. It comes from a disturbance. So you watch how you talk. So that blah, 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 and everybody knows that you're disturbed. I mean, you can be talking about the moon is blue, but the way you talk about it, people know you're disturbed. And then, in this talking on and on and on, maybe we're simply boring the one who is listening. Is he really listening, or is he just waiting for his turn to bore you? Yeah. So, to find a man who is silent, you go out and find one who carries this silence. It might be that you could learn a great deal just by being in that silence. Because when the mind is not so full of furniture, when there is this silence, when the words are not springing around, then heart can speak to heart. And that takes no words, no. And yet, with a man who knows his silence, when he uses a word that is born out of this silence, then it's a very alive word, and it carries something with it. And so we look for this silence in ourselves. There is a place, there is a state of silence in which you're carrying nothing. So, very often we ask, you're seeking. You're fine, you're seeking. Where are you seeking? Where? Are you looking amongst all these words and shuffling them around? What primarily are you seeking? You might say, well, you're looking for an answer to the question, what is God? What is God? Where is God? Well, don't just sit on one chair after another in your head, If the content of the mind is just all sitting there and churning around, what kind of a contact can you make? The words then just want out. And so we follow the words. We're also caught in the trap, you see. They want out, we go out. And we go out, and we go out, and we go out. See? What we really want is in. Yeah. It's like this. A monk that we talk about now and then. And we dump a lot of stuff on him. Early one morning, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. The bartender was, of course, in bed, sound asleep. He'd gone home. And his phone began to ring. And he answered it, and it was our monk. And he asked him, "What time does the bar open?" And of course, his bartender was annoyed. And he answered, "This is no time to inquire about such a thing. You know very well. We open at 9. So go to sleep and wait." 10 minutes later, the phone rings again. And again, it's the monk. And he says, "This is urgent. Tell me, when is the bar going to open?" And now the bartender is quite annoyed. "What do you think you're doing? I told you. 9 o'clock. 10 minutes later, the phone rings again. And here's a monk. And this bartender says, "Are you crazy? You're going to have to wait until 9 o'clock for a drink." And this monk says, "But you don't understand. I don't want to drink. I'm locked in the bar and I want to get out." Huh? See, this is us. We want out. We even have such phrases as "stop the world, I want to get off." We want out. 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 Huh? You think you want out? No, you don't. Not really. You want in. You want in. Go in. In. Leave the words out here. Go in. Right? Now, the word mushin in Japanese is hoisted in Chinese. And in English, it's no mind. No mind. Yeah. Which simply means to be free from mind attachments. To be free of all the things that stick in the mind. They call it an abiding mind. A mind that sticks with something, is abiding, it is attached to. And in the Diamond Sutra, it is written, one should let the non-abiding mind emerge. One should allow the non-abiding mind to emerge. It's there. All you have to let it do is make an appearance. I can't say let it out, can I? Mm-mm. It's in. We have to meet it. Yeah. And it's like this. There was a man that went to the races every year. On his birthday, he allowed himself this pleasure of going to the races, horse races. And the whole year, all the rest of the year, he saved his money for this event. And of course, every year he lost. But, a couple of days later, and the hope revived itself again, He went and he'd lose, and he'd decide he'd never go again. And then a few days later, you know it well, Willie, don't you? But you come again. Year is a long time, Who knows? I could win next time, This year, I may become rich. See? So one more try. And his birthday came, and he was ready to go to the races again. And then he reached the wonderful age of 50. And on this 50th birthday, he thought, now I should really try wholeheartedly. And he sold all of his possessions and said to himself, either I will be a beggar or I will be a king. No more in the middle. So he went to the windows to see the horses that were running. And he looked at these names. And there was one called Adolf Hitler. And he decided this would do. At that time, Adolf Hitler was rather victorious. And so this horse must be really ferocious and strong. So he bet everything he had on this one horse. And he lost it all. And now he had nowhere to go. He had nothing left. And he went out and he stood on this cliff and looked out there, And he was about to finish it all and just really jump off. And when suddenly he heard this voice. And this voice seemed to come up out of him, and it said, stop. And next time I will give you the name of the winner. Don't kill yourself. Don't jump. And of course, hope revived. Hmm? And so he worked very hard that year. If he was going to have this big victory, he was finally going to be rich. Everything that he'd been waiting for was now going to happen. And then the day came, and with his trembling heart, he came to the windows, and he looked around, and he just stood there, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited. And sure enough, all of a sudden, here was this voice, and it said, "Choose a horse, Churchill." Without any argument, without thinking, without the mind coming in at all. He staked everything on this horse, Churchill, and it won. So he went back to the windows, and he stood there, and again he just waited, and he waited, and finally here comes this voice, and it said, "Now, Stalin." So he bet everything that he had won and everything else on this horse, Stalin, and it came in first. Now he had a huge sum of money. I mean, he really won. And so he went to the windows again, and this third time he stood there, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and this voice said, "No more." And he said to this voice, "Keep quiet." And he chose a horse named Nixon. And naturally he lost. So again, he didn't know what to do with himself. He went back to the cliff, and he's muttering to himself, "Now what shall I do?" And here comes this inner voice and says, "Now you jump." You know, Zen is full of this jumping off a cliff or off a 100-foot pole. You know, get away from the attachments, the words. You know, as I said a couple of weeks ago with this Avatamsaka Sutra, that not many people know it thoroughly, and that even when you do know it thoroughly, you still have to jump off the 100-foot pole. That final leap has to be made. And so Zen looks for mind awakening. And we all have moments when the mind stops churning for a few seconds, when all of a sudden we could say it is unemployed. Yeah. No work to do. See? And sometimes without any rhyme, without any reason, or maybe that your eyes just fall upon a ray of the sun coming through the trees, or maybe a breeze touches your face, or suddenly there are two little white butterflies flitting around a bush in the garden, or a little hummingbird that gets scared away by a spider. All these little things, huh? And to suddenly see with a non-attached mind, or this no mind, the whole world changes. You know. What happened? Suddenly, the whole world has changed. What happened? Well, we could say that consciousness shifted from the created mind, that is the content of the mind, all the furniture, from the created mind to the unborn mind, the uncreated mind, the non-abiding mind. It shifted from the abiding to the non-abiding, and this no mind of Zen, which is always present. And then it is a strange thing, but this created mind, this abiding, born mind, steps in and says, "Oh, I must have more of this. I must have more moments like this." And so you stand there in the breeze, or in the sun, or in the garden, and you stand there and you wait, and you stand there and you wait, and you stand there and you wait, and it doesn't happen again. Why? Yeah. And then sometimes when we sit for meditation, there are glimpses, you know. And how happy, how joyous you are in these glimpses. And then this created mind comes in and says, be happy, look what I've done. Yeah, look at what's happening. And immediately the contact is lost. Yeah. The so-called victory is snatched out of your hand. Because with the created mind, there isn't any victory. Yeah. With the no mind, there is no defeat. Yeah. So just allow the consciousness to shift from a mind, abiding mind, to no mind. In this uncreated mind, this unborn mind, everything is precisely as it should be. You are absolutely at home. And when this abiding mind, this sticking mind steps in again, immediately you're outside again. He's outside again. Now, in the teaching, we have that all beings are originally endowed with uncreated mind. We're born with it, and we never lose it. We can know it, but we cannot grasp it, because grasping is done with a created mind. This uncreated mind is pure, and it's clear, and so it is likened to a mirror. However, our creations, our likes and our dislikes, our prejudices, and our envy and our greed and our graspings, they veil this mirror, and it becomes obscure in this dust. Now, when our graspings and our dislikes and our prejudices and so on are ignored, when they are ignored, then through the practice of meditation, they cease to rise. They don't have the same power. And then in that, there again comes this shift, and the mind is enlightened as to what it is, and it leaves nothing unknown. There's no more dust, and the mirror shines, as it were. So there was this head monk under the fifth patriarch, and his name was Shin, and I can't pronounce the rest of it. But when the fifth patriarch asked for, he wanted everybody to write a gatha about their state of understanding. And then it was this Shen wrote and put on a bulletin board, this body is the Bodhi tree. The mind is like a mirror bright. Take heed to keep it always clean, and let not the dust alight. Don't let any dust collect on it. Yeah. And we all know, of course, that he didn't become the sixth patriarch. There's more. This no mind, uncreated, unborn, non-abiding. We could liken it to maybe a crystal ball, let us say, that has no color of its own. It's pure and it's perfect, just as it is. It doesn't need anything added to it. It doesn't need anything taken away. It is perfect as it is. The moment that it is confronted by what we call the outside world, the world of appearances, everything that is perceived through the senses, this pure state takes on all the color and form of differentiation. Let us say that this crystal ball is placed against, we could even say a dark curtain. And so it becomes a dark-colored ball. we as human beings, sentient beings, we see this dark color now. We look at this ball and we see this dark color as belonging to the ball. We don't seem to see that it's a reflection. It belongs to the ball, we say. In India, they have this story about a teacher and his student walking along by a river, and the river is full of leaves and branches and twigs and all sorts of things. And the student comments about it. And the teacher says to the student, go dip your hand in the water and get a handful of water. And the student did that. And that water was clear and pure. Always. No matter what you put into it. The moment the thing is by itself, it is clear and it is pure. The twigs and the leaves are not the nature of the crystal ball, of the river. When this dark ball now, let us say, is seen by someone who is ignorant, that doesn't know anything about crystal clearness of the unborn mind, then they think, well, it's dirty. This mind is dirty. It's unkempt, How can one then convince a person of its essential purity? And they're going to run around and they're going to have to purify the mind. They have to purify the mind. And they go through all kinds of contortions to purify the mind. And the mind is already pure. From the very beginning, it has not been anything else but pure. No matter what has been reflected in it, it is still pure. Now, let us say you placed a mirror, at Times Square in New York, and all the people, high up and low down, and everything in between, passed by. Does it make any difference to the mirror? Is the mirror in any way less than original? Well, you know better. The only problem seems to be that we keep putting this crystal purity out there. It's out there somehow. The patriarchs of old and the Zen masters of today, of course, recognize that this no mind is to be sought. You look for it in your own mind. So it's mind looking for mind in a way, without any words. And this is very difficult because of our habit of running out there. Everything is outside. We have even made in our created mind God outside. So let the consciousness shift from the outside to the inside and perceive this reality as it is. Now this Chuang Tzu, he taught in the southern part of China, and his was a gradual way, the gradual school, so that all these steps had to be taken. And Wei Ning, the sixth patriarch, he was of the northern school, and his was the abrupt teaching, that you sit for meditation, and abruptly, directly, immediately, you see. Yeah, so they call it the northern school and the southern school, where this comes from. And now, this southern school, the head of the southern school, sent one of his disciples to Wei Ning, to the northern school, to find out what this man was doing. He sent a spy, in other words. And Wei Ning knew it immediately when this little man came, and he said to him, I hear that your master instructs people in the triple discipline of the precepts, meditation, and transcendental knowledge. Tell me, how does your master do this? And so this monk told him, he said, the master teaches the precepts, meditation, and knowledge in this way. Not to do evil is the precept. To do all that is good is knowledge, and to purify one's own mind is meditation. This is, he went on, he says, this is his view of the triple discipline, and his teaching is in accord with it. Yeah. Now, what is your view, O Master? And Wei Ning answered him, this is a wonderful view, but mine is different. How so? Said the little monk. Wei Ning said, there is a slow view and there is a quick view. And so this little monk asked him to explain this further. And he says, listen to my teaching then. According to my view, the mind as it is in itself is free from ills. This is the precept of self-being. The mind as it is in itself is free from disturbances. And this is the meditation of self-being. The mind as it is in itself is free from follies. This is the knowledge of the self-being. Pretty nice, huh? Yeah. Now, Fa Zong, he lived around 643, and he was one of the great minds of China. And he was, well, I mentioned him a few weeks ago, and we went into his fourfold Dharma Dhatu, the spiritual reality. The Li and the Shi, the event and the appearance and the reality. And he was the one who made his appearance in the royal court before the empress, and he used the golden lion analogy. And he talked about a mutual solution or an unimpeded solution in which the dichotomy between reality and appearance disappears. The dichotomy between reality and appearance disappears. So in this disappearance of this dichotomy, what do you think remains? Now, in the Tang Dynasty, it was a great era of prosperity and progress, and the cultural and spiritual inspirations were at their height. The Empress Wu was very interested in what was called their Chan Buddhism, which we know today in Japan as Zen. And she was so intrigued with this fascinating teaching that for some years before becoming the empress, she lived as a nun in a convent. And it was after that why she was called to the imperial court by the order of the Emperor Cao Zong. And when he died, why she usurped the throne, even though she was not his wife, she was a concubine. She took over the throne, and she became the first and the last empress of China. She was hated, and she was loved. She was denounced, and she was admired. She was a very, very controversial figure and remains that to this day. But this very extraordinary woman is regarded as being one of the greatest statesmen ever to appear in Chinese history. She ruled for 20 years. Interesting, huh? And Zen made great progress. When the translation of what we now call the Abhitamsaka Sutra reached her, it was almost completed. She invited this Master Fa Tong to court, and he had this reputation of being one of the 5 patriarchs of the Abhitamsaka. So he must have had a tremendous mind. Yeah. And privately, she questioned him about it. And he saw that even though she had a very brilliant mind, she was rather at a loss to understand his insight of it. So one day she asked him, very interesting question she asked him, Reverend Master, I understand that man's knowledge is acquired through two approaches. One by experience, and that is the direct approach. And the other is by inference, which is an indirect approach. I also understand that the five consciousnesses, the seeing, the hearing, and the tasting, and the smelling, and the touching, and the alaya, only consciousness, take the direct approach. Whereas the mind, or the sixth consciousness, can take both. Therefore, the findings of the conscious mind, the sixth sense, is not always trustworthy. The superiority and the reliability of direct experience over indirect inference is taught in many scriptures. And she said, further, you have explained the Avatamsaka with great clarity and ingenuity. And sometimes it seems to me I can almost see this vast Dharma Dhatu, that is this spiritual reality, in my mind's eye. But all this, I realize, is merely indirect conjecture. It's guesswork. One cannot really understand totality in an immediate sense before reaching enlightenment. With your genius, however, I wonder if you can give me a demonstration as that will reveal some of the mysteries of the Dharma Dhatu, including such wonders as all in one and one in all, and the simultaneous rising of all realms, and the interpenetration of all dharmas, and the non-obstruction of space and time, and the like. That's her question. How many people do you know that could come up with such a question? Yeah. And Fa Tsang looked there at her for a while, and he closed his eyes, and he looked at her again, and he says, I'll try. And he's going to give a demonstration of all of that. And a few days later, he came to the Empress, and he said, would you please come with me, and I will give you a demonstration. And he led her into a room that was lined with mirrors. They were on the ceiling, they were on the walls, they were on the floor. Completely mirrored. And in the center of this, all these mirrors, center, sitting on a mirror, is a statue of a Buddha with a burning torch. And she looked at this and imagine, she says, how fantastic, how marvelous. She looked at this awe-inspiring panorama of infinite interreflection. Buddhas and torches reflecting and reflecting and reflecting and reflecting. And very slowly, he said to her, this is a demonstration of totality in the Dharma Dhatu. In each and every mirror, you will find the reflection of all the other mirrors. All have the image without omission. Nothing is lacking. Which is an example of one in all and all in one. And they all rise simultaneously without effort. So he went on and answered her question, All is about interpenetration, and one is dependent on the other. The whole thing was in this room. And then he took a crystal ball from his sleeve, and he placed it in the palm of his hands. And then he put it over there with the Buddha, And he says, now look, we see all the mirrors and all the reflections into this small crystal ball. You try it. It also reflects in the crystal ball. And here we have an example of the small containing the large, as well as the large containing the small. Non-obstruction in reality. But you try and walk through a wall, you're obstructed. In reality, you wouldn't be. His instructions, as you know, were, when the one is absorbed by all, one penetrates all. When all is absorbed by one, all penetrates the one. When one is absorbed by one penetrates into one. When all is absorbed by all penetrates into all. See, this is what is he. Now, as you sit there and as you go about your business, you know that you're supposed to be the master of your house. I could ask, I say you are supposed to be the master of your house. What you? What you? Yeah. The mind, is supposed to be the manager. It's kind of a director in there. It takes your instructions as to how to direct the thing. And it's supposed to obey you. Yeah. But this manager has absorbed so much power and so much control, it thinks it's the master. And that which is really the master is forgotten. We have all had moments, glimpses of seeing. When that moment comes, please don't be in control. Don't try to be in control. When it happens, just be grateful. And when it happens, don't immediately ask for a repetition. The mind will immediately say to you, okay, I know the trick. I'll get it back for you. Just be grateful. When the fish is caught, you forget the trap. When the meaning is caught, you forget the words. And there is a little, I guess you could call it a koan. While the wooden man is singing, the stone maiden starts to dance. How can you give any thought to this? Stop thinking, for heaven's sakes. I got to figure it out. I got to figure this thing out. While the wooden man is singing, how can a wooden man sing? When the wooden man is singing, the stone maiden starts to dance. How can you give any thought to this? How can you give any thought? Thought. Be. Let this mind emerge, this non-abiding mind, and then you'll know why a stone maiden can dance when a wooden man sings. And now, may the peace and the power that passeth all understanding hold us and keep us in the love of the Christed consciousness while we are seemingly separate one from another. And I do thank you very much.
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.